comfortably with your back straight. Just feel being in the room. Bring your awareness into the room. Sounds, temperature of the air. Energy of others in the room. And then get that sense of withdrawing your awareness from the room and into your body. Feel yourself solidly on the ground, being supported, or the chair. See if you can get a sense of energy moving up your spine, through your neck and the top of your head, and then let everything else relax around it. Do a quick check on the places where maybe you hold tension. Hips, knees, hands, shoulders, the face, eyes, brows, mouth. And use your exhale to let it go. And then see if you can remind yourself, bring to mind why it is that you're here in this room tonight. And how fortunate we are to be able to have the conditions to gather like this. That you have the leisure time and you have the interest and the energy. And maybe a sense of gratitude for that. And an open-heartedness. so that you would wish for all beings that they have the conditions to do what they feel is really important to them. And that they have the good fortune to know what that is. All right, and when you're ready, bring the contemplation to a close. So, maybe we'll talk about the exercises at the end of class. This is the last class in the series, so just to do a bit of a review and kind of a summary of where we've been. So the first class we did was how to put your life together, changes you can make, lifestyle changes that you can make that help make your life conducive to mindfulness, to living mindfully rather than mindlessly. And a course like this is a great opportunity to be able to step back a bit and take a look at what your life looks like and whether or not you've put it together in such a way that it helps support what you want to do, and also reflect on what you might need to adjust. And the idea is to kind of start with a few simple changes. Don't drastically change your whole life. I mean, some people do that and it works out well for them, but most of the folks I know that like change everything all at once, they can stick to it for maybe about 5 days, maybe a week, something like that. It's much easier to, if you make some kind of simple changes, start with some simple changes that you can integrate into your life. And then as those, things, what did we talk about? We talked about things like getting a good night's sleep, or which most of America at least really doesn't do. And if you've ever been on vacation and you spend the first 2 days sleeping, that means you're not getting enough sleep at home. So getting enough sleep so that you can, approach your day relaxed with a lot more resources. What else did we talk about? We talked about spending time quiet sometime during the day, like in the morning, so that you can reflect on how fortunate your life is, the conditions of this life, and that it's not going to last, and what you want to do with it, what you want to do with these precious, this precious life, this precious day. We talked about, so in the quiet, like no computer, no telephone, no radio or television or anything like that. Just quiet and kind of sweet. It may be a little, if you try that one, it may be a little disorienting at first, but it's really wonderful. Then we talked about not reaching for the credit card every time you're bored, or not going out into the mall every time you're bored as entertainment, not just distracting yourself. What other kinds of things? Anybody remember? Pardon? The different kinds of things that we talked about to make lifestyle changes. Living in a place that isn't, boom, 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 noisy or by a freeway. Living in a safe place. Being around people who, at the very least, are not disdainful of what you're trying to do. All kinds of different things that we talked about. So that was really the bulk of the first class. Then the second and third class was about mindfulness as a meditational practice, where we talked about the 4 pillars of mindfulness. Becoming aware of how you are creating your mental afflictions and how they are, really the mental afflictions are making your decisions. Deciding how you're going to run your life, what you're going to do, how you're going to treat people. And that is more true if you don't even know that they're there, right? If you're not hearing them, if you're not noticing them as an internal process, rather than as reaction to something that you think is coming at you, then it's even more so that the mental afflictions are running your life. There are different reasons that it's valuable to do this. One, the first level is you see what you have to work on. Right? You become aware of how anger or impatience or jealousy or pride or any of those kinds of things arise within you. And as an internal process, and how you can, as you see it begin to arise, so what are the 4 pillars? Sensory data. Sensory. Information comes in through the senses. A feeling that is connected to that sensory data arises within the space of the mind and comes together as a thought or a feeling. And it can be interrupted at any, if you notice yourself, if you see yourself putting it together, you can interrupt it. And you can make better choices. So that's one level. And then at another level, practices like this one start to give you a picture that you are not who you think you are, in the sense of a fixed or stable or an essential self, an essential identity. As you watch the creation and flow of these feelings into thoughts, and as they change, because it's not like, oh, there's one, and then and then going along, nothing's happening, and then there's another one, right? It's a constant flow that's happening, and as you begin to be able to watch that flow, you realize that you are not a fixed self, a fixed identity, stable and essential, any of those kinds of things. You are a process. You are always in process. It's like a flow rather than a thing. We take that process and we name it, right? Chuck, Lori, Lauren. And then Lama Marut says we thingify it. We turn it into a thing. I'm Lauren. But it's really just a process. It's like, if you think about a river a river is, there is no such thing, for instance, as the Colorado River, in the way that we think there is. River is just water flowing, right? It's just, within kind of vague and somewhat changing boundaries. It's just water moving. And then we name it Colorado River as though it's a thing, rather than just movement of water. And that's what you are. We take this label and we overlay it on a process. Colorado River, Lauren. And then we think it's a stable thing, but it's not. Recognizing that you are a process rather than this, stable identity makes it a lot easier to not be attached to it, not be invested in it. It makes it a lot easier to think about changing it. You're not changing a rock, you're changing a river. That's a lot easier to do when you recognize that it's a conception. This self-conception. When you recognize that you are a conception that you have of yourself, it's a lot more malleable, a lot easier to work with, and can even kind of be exciting. If all I have is an idea of myself, well, ideas are easy to change. Easier to change than rocks. So how can I have a more positive self-conception? You're more open to that question, and then you can start working on actions that will change that self-conception. Things that have to do with living a moral life, which is the main way to change it, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Self-conception is a product of karma, right? You don't have karma. You are karma, in the sense of we are our memories. We are who we think we once were. So you can do, you can do this thought experiment. If you had no memory of your life, who would you be? How would you know who you are if you had no memory of what happened in your life? It's a really cool thing to think about that can give you a sense of, oh my God, I am just a collection of my memories. So, as individuals, as the individual somebody self, what we are our memories, is our memories. And if you want to improve that self-conception, change your memories. Make better memories. That's a better way to say it, not change them. Make better memories. Two ways to do that. One is to go back and take the memories that you have that you think are, absolutely true. God help us if you've ever compared what you remember happened with somebody else who was there. But they're just wrong, right? I remember, they're just wrong because I remember. So you can reinterpret the memories that you have. And how to do that, we talked about that, I think, a great deal the last Middle Way course, the Spiritual Renegade course. We talked about forgiveness and gratitude. You forgive people, and you feel grateful. And it'll come up a little bit tonight as well. Another way to have a better self-conception is to change now what will be your future memories. right? Actions in the present are going to be your memory of tomorrow. So you be very careful about what you're doing now in order to have the conception of yourself that you would like to have tomorrow, next week, next, year, next lifetime, etc. And you can do that by acts which are conducive to the happiness of others. Right? This is karma that we're talking about. That's how you create happiness for yourself. So you ask yourself, what kind of imprints do I want to have tomorrow, next week, next year? What kind of memories do I want to have? Because that will become the self that I conceive of in the future. That's the past, that's the future. So, yeah, and this is a, when we talk about karma usually, it's the if you do this, you will get that. And, that's it's a little more complicated than that. That's kind of Karma 101. That's usually how karma is taught. Advanced karma is recognizing what we've just been talking about, that you create your self-conception through your actions. And you create your conception of the world through your actions. Given the fact that you are this processive flow, it's not that difficult to do. We often make it sound very difficult, but it is kind of step by step, not that difficult to do. It means that you have to kind of take yourself in hand now, right? But actually not, not that difficult if you are paying attention to it. So that your actions create this self-conception, that's the somebody self that Lama Marut talks about often, right? That's the impermanent and processive and flowing sense of self. But that you do have, that has memories, that has, experiences, that has relationships, that interacts with the world. That's the somebody self. You go to an even deeper level of this. These meditations can give you an inkling of the somebody self, the 4 pillars thing, and meditations like it, but it can also give you an inkling, a picture, a glimpse of the nobody self that Lama Marut talks about. Let me just go, when we were in a couple of classes earlier, we were talking about, the wave and the ocean, right? So the somebody self is the wave. And I don't mean to say that that doesn't exist, right? It does exist. Not the way we think it does, but there is a somebody self. Like I said, that's the one that interacts with the world, has sisters and brother, all these things. That self does exist as a process. This meditation, though, can give you a taste, an introduction to the nobody self, or to, he sometimes calls it the everybody self. You could say that the nobody self is the negative way of, it's not negative as in bad, but it's expressing what's missing, right? And the everybody self is more an expression of what's there, a kind of a plenitude, a kind of a oneness, the ocean. So it can give you an experience of that as well. The somebody self is the impermanent one, in the sense that everything that is born dies, everything that arises dissolves. That's the somebody self. On that deeper level, we have never been born. It never dies. Right? Yeah. And to realize that, to have an experience of that self, a sense of that self, the nobody self, is very, very powerful and transformative. So that's what the second and third classes were about. Starting with the fourth class and all the way up through tonight, we moved to using the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, using the chapter called Guarding Awareness. And this is about developing, creating, developing, and guarding the awakened mind, the awakened heart mind, as we were talking about before, not the brain matter, not the collection of data, but the mindset, the context within which thoughts, feelings arise, that is imbued with, like they say, perfumed with a sense, with a sensibility. It's where that self-conception occurs. And what you're awakening to is the integration with reality that we've been talking about. Awakening to the fact, for instance, that we are interdependent and not independent with other beings, with objects, right? That we are a process, not a thing. Awakening to the fact that we are not only waves, but also ocean. And we all have this kind of warring impulse, where two warring impulses. On the one hand, we all want to be somebody, and we want it to be a bigger and better somebody. We grasp more and more to that individual ego self. And bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, but also to improve it. I mean, when you're saying, I want to be enlightened, that's the somebody self that wants to be enlightened. I'm acting, I'm being generous, I'm practicing patience. That's the somebody self, right? But on the other hand, if you want to think about the somebody self and you're like, I'm not really sure who that is or what that is, so think of yourself being wrongly accused of something. And what is it that kind of jumps up to defend yourself? That's the ego. That's the somebody self. So we want to improve it, but we also want it, we want it to be respected, and we want, and all kinds of things. We want to be separate, we want to be special. But then there's also this feeling of isolation with that self, that nobody really knows me, nobody, there's a kind of a loneliness that we often feel, so that there is this other impulse that we have to be part of something larger than that self, to recognize, to have contact with that ocean, right? And the larger thing that you want to be part of is, I'm not talking about, okay, I want to be part of my church group, right? It's an all-inclusivity that we want to be in touch with. The nobody or the everybody self, the plentitude. So guarding awareness is about creating, developing, and protecting that mindset, that state of mind that is imbued with understanding. And we have to guard it because until what some of you may know of as the direct perception of emptiness, it's not a cessation. It won't last. It's not like you have that realization once and that, and then, yet that mindset can fade. So we have to guard it and we have to protect it. And that's what we've been doing for the last couple of classes and what we'll do here. So, yeah. No.
I thought just on the cessations, I thought it was like a cessation was something that like altered, like it's not something that necessarily lasts, but something that alters the way that you view something. Is that not true?
A cessation is a stopping. Right? Something ceases, never to occur again. I hate the example I'm thinking of. Yeah, I'm not going to use that example. Go ahead.
So when you have a realization, say you experience DPE, you think of something in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So that would stop and go away that you think about it. Is that considered?
Permanently. A cessation is a permanent stopping or change. So if you, for instance, in the direct perception of emptiness, they say one of the things that ceases is doubt about the truth of your experience and about the path that you're on, meaning that you will never have doubt about it again. Out of the, kind of 84,000 mental afflictions, there are only like 2 or 3 that stop permanently, right? So when you're talking about the direct perception of emptiness, yeah, that it changes the way you view the world. There are other kinds of cessations that don't necessarily change the way you view the world. A cessation just means it stops permanently.
So it is, in a sense, for some, like in the case of the Tao, it is a cessation.
In the sense of the Tao?
The doubts. Like,
Oh, the doubt, yes.
Then it would be a cessation.
That would be a cessation of doubt, yeah. Okay. So, to get to the verses, we're at verse 70 of 108. And there will be, if you're looking at the readings, there will be more verses than I'm going to be talking about here tonight, because there are some things that I think are, that we really definitely want to touch on. And when I prepared the entire class, including all the verses, it would have been about 4 hours long. So, the mind has been deposited into the vessel which is the body, something that makes it possible to move around. Make the body go where you wish to in order to fulfill the needs of living beings. So we talked about this a little bit last week, and we'll do it again. This is awareness of the body in terms of just moving through space, right? The vessel that he's talking about, that's the body. But the question is that he's raising here, the vessel that moves through space, and I should be mindful not to knock things over in my path, and look where I'm, don't start walking backwards before I turn around and look that way. We did a number of things like that. But it leaves a question standing, okay, in what direction should I go? What direction should I have this body take me in? So it's important to be aware that we are embodied and what it means to try to negotiate that body. But what's the purpose of having a body and this kind of life? Should not be at the mercy of our body, let it go wandering around willy-nilly, just serving its own needs and pleasures. Right? We should use it also, maybe even primarily, to be the servant of sentient beings, to serve ourselves and others. In case you're unclear on it, and I often am, tell you the truth. I mean, I forget. It's not a cessation. The reason that we should use the body as the servant, you know, this great phrase, as the servant of the world, is because that is how we will become happy. And we've talked about this in previous classes. You get in touch with that in these, you know, in the peak experiences, the state of, you know, kind of the oceanness, when you get in touch with the oceanness. You can do it in different ways. You can do it in, you know, sometimes, you know, getting lost in music, getting, you know, in ecstatic dance, in, you know, in sexual experiences, even in a poem. You can get these, you know, these kinds of peak experiences, but the dance or the song or the, you know, the sex or the poem or whatever it is, they end, right? They're short-term experiences. What you can be in touch with on a much, much regular basis is other people. They're all around you. It is a great way to lose consciousness of the self. The fact that our happiest moments are in these kinds of experiences, where we lose self-consciousness, where we're not thinking, you know, okay, how am I feeling? What am I doing? I'm unhappy. I'm hot. I'm cold. You know, you're not paying attention to that. I can't tell you where my head is for some reason these days, but during certain kinds of experiences, okay, everybody in this room is over the age of 18. So, for instance, in a sexual experience, at the peak of that kind of experience, you're not saying to yourself, boy, I'm having a really good time. Right? That's not what's happening. You are fully into the experience, if it's any good. Right? You're fully into the experience. You have lost self-consciousness, which is not the same as losing consciousness, right? That's not what we're talking about. But I mean, the fact that, you can have that, like I said, song, dance, poem, a good movie, all kinds of things, a great conversation with a friend. You know, you lose that consciousness of self. It's a great way to lose that consciousness of self. To be conscious of others. Be aware of others, be paying attention to others, and not yourself. You can do that very intentionally. You think about others. We spend a great deal of our time in the company of other people. Just like we don't have karma, we are karma. We don't have relationships. We are our relationships. We're defined by our interactions with others? Who are you in the presence of your, your mother, your lover, your dog, your boss? That self-conception shifts, right? And every experience that you have shifts it. So you can lose yourself in service to those others that we're in relationship. The person at the grocery store, we're in relationship to others all the time. We are interdependent with them. You can lose that self-consciousness by focusing on them rather than yourself. Thich Nhat Hanh says, he says, there is no being, there is only interbeing. He uses that to describe the interdependence of all things, but mostly all beings. The idea of compassion is feeling together with, experiencing one's own fate and the fate of the supposed other as identical. This is interbeing. You get in touch with your oceanness in service to others. I love this one too. This is from Archbishop Desmond Tutu on Ubuntu. Familiar word? I am because you are. One of the sayings in our country is Ubuntu, the essence of being human. Ubuntu speaks particularly about the fact that you can't exist as a human being in isolation. It speaks about our interconnectedness. You can't be human all by yourself, and when you have this quality, Ubuntu, you are known for your generosity. We think of ourselves far too frequently as just individuals separated from one another, whereas you are connected, and what you do affects the whole world. When you do well, it spreads out. It is for the whole of humanity. It's a great quote. Yeah.
It seems to me there are two things here that we're talking about. One is caring for other people or putting our attention on other people in order to distract ourselves from ourselves.
In order to what?
To distract myself from myself. So I'm not so focused on myself. Which is, see, on one hand it sounds like it's a tactic. It's just that, you were saying, I think, that other people are always there. So that's an object, all the flow experiences are not always there, but other people are always there. So I can place my mind there and not be constantly self-obsessed. But, and then there's this, so in that sense, putting our attention on other people is a tactic that we're using because they're just there. But on the other hand, you're saying, well, we are our relationships. I don't know if it's on the other hand, but it's just like two things here. If we are our relationship, and that's how things are, so I must put my attention on other people because doing anything else is kind of senseless, or So I'm wondering how if those things are coming together here, or is it suggesting that we're using one of them and not the other? Does that make sense?
I don't, well, first of all, just one small thing that you said, where you said that the flow experiences are not that easy to come by, but we, but we can, focus on our relationships instead. And it's more like the relationships, the interactions with other can bring us to that flow experience. It is a flow experience. It can be a flow experience. As long as you're not saying, here, let me give you this water. Aren't I doing such aren't I so good because I'm giving you this water, right? That's focusing on yourself even in the act of, handing somebody something. But if you're focused on somebody else, yeah, and so that's one thing. The other thing, I don't see them as different. The problem is that I mean, if we knew and lived that we are our relationships, then then there wouldn't be a decision to make about whether or not I pay attention to this person, whether or not I lose myself in this process, in this flow. That if we knew that in our very bellies, in every fiber of our being, if we knew I am my relationships, but we don't. So yeah, we use certain things to remind us of that. We use tactics, you could say, to put us into those kinds of mindsets, to bring us closer to it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so yeah, all right. Next verse. Someone who has in this way conquered himself should always have a smile on his face and be outgoing, a friend to the world. He should give up frowning and being such a sourpuss. That's a literal translation, no. If you've conquered your ignorance about your attachment to yourself, it's not so much a matter that you should slap a smile on your face and be nice to other people and pleasant. It's if you have conquered that ignorance and attachment, that is how you will be, right? If you've conquered this thing of thinking of yourself as a separate self that can be happy only when it's paying attention to itself, you've conquered that. Then this is how you will be. You'll have a smile on your face. You'll be outgoing, and you'll be a friend to the world. Now, it is also the case that if you haven't achieved that state of conquering that ignorance, then slapping a smile on your face and being outgoing and intentionally being a friend to the world and not a sourpuss helps. It really does. In another life of mine that was still within this birth, we used to call it the act as if. Right? And there's, you act as if you're happy, you act as if you're patient, you act as if you are these things that you would like to be. And there's all kinds of scientific studies now about, the act of engaging the muscles of smiling, and the effect it has on you. And it has actually an effect on your mental state and your health. So, in the times that you have not conquered that ignorance, when you're feeling like a sourpuss and you're feeling selfish and all. I remember at one point I was in a conversation with somebody with Lama Marut about something, and I said. It was a good sign because I said, I'm actually feeling pretty lousy right now. I think I better go out and I forget what it was, serve a table or go clean the center or go, I better go do something like that. Yeah. So even if you're not feeling particularly, we could call it unself-conscious, not conscious of self, you're feeling very self-conscious, then change your face, change your attitude. It will help. Okay. Deferentially, one should accept unsolicited but beneficial words of reproach from others and always be the student of everyone. So Wallace calls it advice, unsolicited and beneficial advice. Batchelor calls it words of admonishment. Lama Marut, I think, likes the idea of reproach because oftentimes we don't necessarily always have a problem with advice, but we always have a problem with reproach, with criticism. Nobody likes it, so he uses it even though it's jarring. Even when the criticism might be solicited, like, you know, do I look fat in this? Or, you know, whatever it is. We don't like hearing it, let alone when it isn't solicited. So this refers to one of the 6 perfections. It refers to patience. It's one way to think about it, or forbearance, not getting angry when it's completely appropriate to do so. When someone criticizes us, like I was talking about before, that knee-jerk reaction to defend the self, you know, that's what happens to us. And that self pumps up. So there are 3 levels of response to a situation. We've talked about this. Where that's happening. 1, you can run away. You can leave the situation. 2nd, you can be a bump on a log while there's a riot going on in your mind, but you just, you know, you just sit there, you take it. And the 3rd one that we always talk about is to love them in the sense of feeling compassion for them, right? That they are in the midst of a mental affliction. But what Master Shantideva is saying here, in terms of the always be the student of everyone, this is a different level of loving them, in the sense of respecting them, in the sense of, for instance, asking what in what they are saying is valid. Really hard to, you know, crack open the self, you know, that thing, you know, just to like, just relax it and be open to it. You don't even have to do it in public. It's a lot easier if you know, you run away or whatever. You do it, for me at least. It's hard to do it on the spot, but this is what he's saying. You're not dismissing them in the sense of feeling compassion for, you know, this love them, feel compassion for them. They're these poor souls who are having a mental affliction and I feel compassionate toward them. That's not what he's saying here. He's saying respect them as your teacher. Be the student of everyone. Sometimes we're very willing to be the student of our official, you know, of an official teacher, you know. Some of us are better at it than others, and some of us are better at some times than we are at other times. But at least we're comfortable with that idea. But there are teachers available, right, 24/7. The people in your life, the spouse, your child, your friend, your coworkers, the annoying person that you ran into at the grocery store who wouldn't get out of your way. These are your in situ teachers, right? They're the ones that you run into contact with every day. They're much more powerful teachers. The guide actually says very clearly and dramatically that the best teacher of patience is not the one who sits up here and tells you about patience. It's the annoying person that you run into every day. They give you the opportunity to actually practice, to gain experience with it, rather than just, wow, that's okay, that sounds reasonable, that sounds, yeah, okay. Wow, how cool. No. They give you the opportunity to integrate it into your life, into your very being, to confront yourself, to gain experience with what you should do and what you should not do. Yeah. And then they give you the experience to fail at it, and then to, learn from those mistakes. What was that when I was talking last week about the customer, was it last week? The customer service person that I was on the phone with, there was a period of time where I was where I would get on with a customer service person. I would say, Lauren, this is a problem for you. So put on your happy face, slap that smile and change your attitude and take care of this person on the other end of the phone. Have great calls, laugh. One time, the time that was the best story is I got on the phone with somebody and and it was like, no, we can't help you. And I'm like, well, no, we can't help you. And I'm doing the whole thing. And then at a certain point, it was like, okay, let me transfer you to someone who can help you. Disconnected. And you know what? I didn't get mad. I just spent 20, 30 minutes on the phone trying to and I didn't get mad. I just started laughing. It was like, and I was, this stuff works. But I haven't been paying that close attention. I got on the phone last week and, So they give you the opportunity to experience failure and then to remind yourself. Someone who is sitting up here in this spot can be very helpful in terms of, showing you possibilities, ways that you hadn't thought of before, to help you think about certain things intellectually. But the teachers that help you actually integrate it into your life are the people in your life. They are your teachers. So that's what he's saying. Be the student of everyone. Okay, and by the way, the same is true for people who have hurt you in your life. Where you're holding on to these hurt feelings and these grudges, even though it's days, weeks, years past. In the same way that we don't want to accept criticism, we don't want to forgive. We don't want to let go of that hurt. We don't want to forgive people for mistakes that they've made that we feel have hurt us, especially if they don't think it was a mistake. Then we really don't want to let it go. We know intellectually it's important to forgive, that it's keeping us sad, it's keeping us angry, it's keeping us from being at peace. But if you are who you think you once were, if you don't let go of that, then you are today a victim. That is your self-conception if you don't let that go. And then yeah, but no, they don't deserve it. They did this bad thing. I'm going to punish them by not forgiving them. But who is the person who gets punished? Who bears that punishment? Who's living with the bitterness and the resentment? Who's defining their present sense of self as in pain or as a victim? And, no magic pill for forgiving. You just work with it over and over and over again, depending on how much trouble you're having, letting it go. You review the benefits of it, being free of it, being free of this hurt feeling. You're free, you can be free of anger and resentment. See that other person as a teacher, what they've taught you, what they've brought to your life, teacher of compassion, teacher of how, other people feel and to be able to be helpful to them, teacher of maybe what not to do to other people. or you remember the interdependence and the opportunity that this person, this event gave you in terms of wisdom. Perhaps the contribution to your good character, like we were talking about last week. That the spiritual life is not about making things easy for us. It's about making us great enough for life. And rather than trying to force life to conform to our suffering minds, the spiritual life is about expanding that so we can meet life as it is and integrate with reality in all of its potential. The possibilities that are not available to that say your name to yourself suffering Lauren. Right? These are the benefits of forgiving yourself. I mean, of forgiving, and yourself too, by the way. Forgiving yourself too, and forgiving others. So you work with it. The ultimate forgiveness involves actually gratitude, where seeing the person in that situation that you've conceptualized as hurting you as a great, great teacher of life and how to help others, and being grateful to them for the teaching. All right. One should applaud all good counsel, and when he sees others doing good, he should sing their praises. This addresses one of the, 7 deadly sins, one of the top 5 or top 10 of the mental afflictions, depending on your system, which is envy. His Holiness, because I told you I also took a teaching on Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life with His Holiness. And what he said about this is even your enemy, right? Applaud even what your enemy does well or advises. You rejoice in goodness wherever you find it. And not only, this is saying, not only do you appreciate it, but you say it out loud. One should speak of others' good qualities behind their back and happily spread the news. When one's own character is being discussed, one should regard it impersonally as the appreciation of good qualities in general. So there are 2 things there. One, when you're, when the good qualities of other people, and then when someone expresses appreciation of your good qualities. So we'll talk about them differently. The other people's good qualities, he's talking about like a kind of gossiping. The good kind of gossiping that you can do where you talk about people to other people about their, about their good qualities, not their bad qualities. That's not just because saying it to their face might build their ego. It's also about saying it to their face in some sense. You can use it as a way to reify your own ego. Like, look how great I am for complimenting you. And if you don't think that's the case, if you don't think you do that, bring to mind the last time you complimented somebody and they said, yes, wasn't I great? And they turned around and walked away. Where they didn't say thank you. And you're like, who the hell do they think they are? They needed to recognize me back at the very least by saying thank you. So when you do it behind when you're not doing it to their face, you're doing it, with somebody else. That kind of an exchange, it disrupts that kind of, the possibility of that kind of turning it into something that feeds the ego. Yeah.
What's the point of talking to someone else positively about another person?
Yeah. to express gratitude and admiration and appreciation in any context changes, it does so many things, but I mean, if you think about it, first of all, it changes the quality of my heart when I do it. It like softens the walls and boundaries of my own heart when I express appreciation, when I express gratitude. It you know, and it has, I think, I mean, I couldn't swear to this, but there is a good possibility of the effect it will have on somebody who's listening. It's catching. You know, it's very rare, I think, and maybe I'm lucky, but at least in my world, it's very rare that I would say to somebody, you know, wasn't that a great class that Mira taught? And they would turn around and say, I thought it sucked. They wouldn't say that. All of a sudden, there's like a possibility of a recognition. Yeah, that was kind of a great class. You know, if they weren't thinking about it for themselves. Yeah? So those are a couple kind of off the top. Yeah. So praising someone to someone else disturbs the possibility that you're going to turn it into just more ego building for yourself. And then if someone praises you, what he's saying here is that you regard it impersonally, as appreciation for the quality itself, and not, look what I did. You know, I mean, don't be the person who says, yes, thank you, I really was great, and then turn around. You know, where you see it as a much more impersonally. You see it as that the person expressing appreciation for this quality being in the world. One of the things that I so admire, I used to ask Lama Marut, you know, why don't you get nervous before you teach class? And I forget how he answered it, but he said, because it's not personal. It's not about me. It's about how, you know, whether or not and how, you know, how we can, you know, kind of ignite inspiration. He says, it's not about me. And when people, and he's not shy about things, and they're saying, how come you're not, you know, kind of shy to say that? And he's, because it's, you know, it's not about me. And I just was like, when people have stage fright, when I'm nervous about a class, it's about what are people gonna think of me? Right? So this is about having that sense that they are appreciative of a good quality in the world, and maybe some sense in you of, I'm grateful for being able to participate in that good quality in whatever way I can. You know, so it's a way for you to turn it into not ego building, but gratitude, not pride. It's something in a way that can help us connect to that nobody, everybody self, rather than the individual ego self. All endeavors are meant to bring us to contentment, but that's very difficult to obtain even for the rich and famous. And so I will enjoy the greatest contentment in the good qualities achieved through the hard work of others. So we talked about this before, that everybody is just trying to be happy and avoid pain, right? And that behind every individual, every you know, kind of specific desire is the desire, which is the end of all desire. And we hope that if we satisfy the particular desire, then we won't have desire again, like the, you know, like the way you scratch the itch, in the hope that it won't itch anymore, but of course it always does. So that's what this is talking about here, that the way to gain, and there are two, Lama Marut talks about gaining contentment in one way, gaining satisfaction, that satisfaction is so, all endeavors are meant to bring us to contentment, but it's very difficult to obtain. So he talks about it in terms of obtaining it in one way. What does he say? Be content. That's how you be content. You be content. If you ask yourself the question, what do I need to be content? And you have an answer to that question, whatever it is, that's your problem. That's why you're not content. It's not because you don't have that thing you named. It's because you think you need that thing that you named to be content, and you don't. The problem is that, but this verse is approaching it from a different angle. So I'm not going to I don't want to take a lot of time there. It's an interesting and a very beautiful way to approach it. Shantideva is talking about the ego you, the say your name to yourself, and the fact that we feel satisfaction from the good that we do. That's his premise. He's suggesting that we stop that narrow view and we gain satisfaction from the good in the world, from the good that we don't have to stop feeling good about what we do, but that we expand that. Because you can go through it. He's talking about, if rich people, he's saying, David Geffen, I think it was, said, anybody who thinks money will buy happiness, don't have it. Once you have it, you realize that it doesn't bring you what it is that you desire, right? Or if I only had the relationship, or if I only had the great job, or any of these kinds of things. The ways in which we scratch that itch actually bring little, it's hard to gain happiness that way, contentment. But there's a whole lot more of it around if we enjoy, if we celebrate the goodness of all people, the goodness in the world. And it is a way to get in touch with that, that oceanic thing, which can be a greater, more consistent source of joy. And people are doing, large and small, wonderful things all the time. If you look around, I mentioned Mira's class Saturday, I think it was. It was an amazing class, and sitting there, I was aware of it on two levels. One, that it was an amazing class, and two, just what a pleasure it was to be there, and how fortunate I was to be in that class. His Holiness in the world, Lama Marut, and so many great teachers everywhere. The little kindnesses that people do all the time for each other. The folks in this room, who are interested in doing this and sharing this process. Good works and good qualities are all over the place. And Master Shantideva is saying, find your contentment in that. Enjoy them, revel in them. Let your satisfaction come from that. This doesn't cost me anything now and will bring me great happiness later, whereas animosities bring enmity and suffering now and great suffering later. it doesn't cost me anything now. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not like if Mira teaches a great and extraordinary class, then somehow that diminishes me as a teacher, right? It doesn't work that way. If I admire her as a teacher, it doesn't mean, you know, that doesn't subtract from me at all. My enjoyment of her teaching enhances me as a teacher because I can learn from her. And then, you know, maybe be able to use what I have learned from her to, you know, to help people in my classes, right? It actually enhances me as a teacher to appreciate, you know, to appreciate her as a teacher. And then here's the other thing, that for instance, teaching is not about aggrandizing the teacher, like I said before. It's about igniting something for, quote, students, and celebrating that ignition wherever it comes from. You know, whatever is the spark is a great, great satisfaction. That, you know, and then it says, if I think, what does it say? Oh, animosities bring enmity and suffering. So if, for instance, if I think Mira's teaching diminishes me as a teacher, man, what does that bring on? Like ill will and malice and resentment and all of that kind of stuff. It damages me the moment I feel it, and it damages me into the future, and damages everybody I come into contact with, right? My world gets smaller, you know, and more limited. Potential becomes more and more limited. Her teaching enhances my world. Potential becomes unlimited. Joy increases everywhere. The teaching that Mira, I also sat in a teaching by Lindsay Krauss. I mean, I've been in a number of her teachings. I like to go to people's teachings. But one time I sat in a teaching that she did, and I was just like, same thing, where it was just brilliant, spellbinding. Yeah, so I thank God to be able to be in those, or the universe, or my karma, or whatever it is. So that's the kind of thing he's saying. Competent and exuberant, one should always be a self-starter. In all endeavors, do not pass the buck onto anyone else. Means don't wait for others to do what must be done. When you see something that needs doing, you just do it. And don't be upset if you don't get any help with it. That's the way it is. Instead, be exuberant, be grateful for the opportunity. I'm having a cramp for some reason. So basically it means take responsibility, right? For your life and for your world. And see it as a great opportunity to help you in this processive traveling on your path. And let's take a break while I stretch my leg. The perfections of giving and the rest are presented in hierarchical order. One should not reject a higher one for the sake of a lower one. unless it is to shore up one's practice. So, how many have studied the 6 perfections in detail? It goes like this. Okay. All right. So the 6 perfections, they are the qualities of a bodhisattva, someone who has bodhicitta, which is someone who is has an awakening mind. We talked a lot about that, I think, last week, right? That bodhicitta thing, but we'll talk more about it today. So the 6 perfections are a quality of that bodhisattva. They're perfections because by practicing them, you become perfect. They're perfectionizers. You don't know them in order?
I used to. Ethics, yeah. So, joyful effort, yeah.
Giving, morality, patience.
Okay. Then
Joyful effort,
meditation,
meditative concentration.
wisdom.
Perfect. Great. That order is not by accident. There is a whole teaching, which we don't have time for tonight, about how the practice of one leads you naturally to the next one, and that you practice that which leads you to the, very naturally to the next one. Which doesn't mean like, oh, I can't practice patience, I can't be patient because I'm still on generosity. That's not what it means. But it does mean here, as Shantideva is saying, that you don't want to say, well, I guess just what I just said. You don't want. It's like we find ourselves in some ways attracted to certain ones, being able to do them well, and then we just figure, well, I'll just ride that one on through to enlightenment, and that won't happen. Right? The only one actually that is going to get you awakened is wisdom. And the other 5 perfections are a means to that end. So the point is not to get really good, although you want to get really good at kindness. At generosity, at kindness, which is kind of another word for ethics, at patience. You do want to get really good at those. But that's not the point. The point is the realization of wisdom. That is the source of true happiness. The true understanding of of that nobody, everybody self, and the somebody self, and the interdependence of those. Because, by the way, there can be no nobody self if there isn't a somebody self. There can be no somebody self if there isn't a nobody, right? So these things are interdependent. But that sense of feeling that communion, that oneness, that oceanness, that flow in the interdependent whole. That's part of wisdom, yeah.
Would you state the 6 perfections?
Giving,
That's like everybody there. Okay, in the five lifetime lay vows, or no, it's always the sexual misconduct that people forget. It's in the 10 misdeeds or in the 5, it's like, yeah, in the 5, it's always that one that they can't remember.
They
So-
are in some kind of order, you said?
Yes.
They are giving,
ethics, patience. I thought it was ethics and morality.
Ethics and morality are the same.
All right.
Patience, meditation. Giving, ethics, patience.
Joyful,
Effort,
virya,
joyful effort.
meditative concentration, and wisdom. One time I was in a class as Lama Marut was teaching, and I was kind of a senior. I wasn't teaching yet, and I was a senior student. And he turned to a woman who we had started kind of about the same time. And she said, and he turned to her and he said, "What is the first of the 5 paths?" And she went. She could not remember it. And I was so glad that he asked her, because I couldn't remember either. And I just tried to sit there looking. You know how when you don't want to be called on, you go like this? Okay, so this is, what he's saying here is, don't forsake the higher, which is wisdom, for the lowers. So, for instance, you don't decide to, skip a class like Mira's class because I've got to go work in a soup kitchen or something like that. That kind of thing. Of course, if you find yourself acting unkindly as you're practicing your wisdom, like if she's teaching a class, like that, you don't just turn around and you say, "There go all my commitments of ways that I was going to be helping people, so I can go." If you're starting to act unkindly or ungenerously, then you go back. Then you shore up your practice, right? And you go back to those things. You need to go back to them. You remind yourself how you got these amazing classes. It was through kindness and morality. But we tend to get stuck on the ones that we're attracted to and think that it'll bring us to the goal. It won't. So you keep going. The only thing that will bring us to the kind of transformation and realization we're seeking is wisdom. Keeping this in mind, one should continually exert oneself for the sake of others. Even that which has been prohibited is allowed for a compassionate person who can discern the benefit. Okay, so we've had a couple of pretty radical statements in this text, and here's another one where he's saying, okay, in some cases, it's okay to break the rules. And this question always comes up when we go through the misdeeds and we get to the one about lying. And somebody always inevitably, somebody raises their hand and says, what if a refugee comes to my door and asks for me to hide them, and then, a battered woman comes to my door and asks me to hide her, and then the husband comes pounding on the door, where's my wife, is she in there? Do I have to tell the truth? His Holiness's first answer was, come ask me again when that happens, because it's actually pretty rare that comes up. But Master Shantideva is saying here, he's saying, well, it depends. Because here's the trick. A lie is a lie. And the reason that's true is not because it's written in the it is one of the 10 Commandments, right? Is it one of the 10? Okay. Such a bad Jew. And it is a lie, and it's not like, God doing this or something like that. It's because it's on that list that it's a bad thing. The problem with lying is that in this we could put it in the way of, in the idea of integrating with reality in terms of speech. You want your speech to conform with reality as you see it. And the benefit of that is that, you know, I mean, the kind of most radical way of saying it in some of the texts is the result of that is that eventually reality will conform with your speech. Right? Where you can begin to say things and they become true. If you can, you know, bring your, now, you know, that's one of those things that sounds pretty amazing and radical. And we don't necessarily have to go that far with it in terms of, is that true or is that not true? Like if I say, okay, the stream is going to run uphill, will it suddenly run uphill? But the idea is that part of integrating with reality is the intentional effort to bring your speech to conform with reality. It creates that kind of mindset. It creates that impression, that conceptualization that your speech and reality are together. And when you lie, you're not doing that. You know, so that's another way to look at it. You are not bringing your speech to conform with reality. You're not moving towards the integration with reality. You're actually moving away from it when you lie. So the karmic effect of a lie, we could talk about it this way, is that you perpetuate the disjuncture between, you know, between reality, between your conception of self and your conception of reality. You perpetuate that disjuncture, including the fact that you will see other people deceiving you in the future. Okay, so you have to weigh it up. You know, bam, 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 where's my wife? Where's my wife? I'm going to kill her. Is she in there? You make the decision, am I willing to take the karmic hit of telling a lie in order to potentially save this life? That's the question. The answer to that may very well be yes. Perhaps should be yes. But don't kid yourself that there won't be that karmic hit of not bringing your speech closer to your conception of reality. There will be that karmic hit. There will also be the karmic hit, the karmic consequence of, you know, of an act of sacrifice isn't quite the right word, but of putting someone else's need and interest before your own. Right? You've put the need or interest of that woman before your own. Yeah, I'll take the karmic hit. This matters. And even to some extent, it matters in terms of the perpetrator, but we won't go there. Right? Now, in terms of the bam, bam, bam guy at the door, that's one thing. Do you like this shirt? Is it worth the karmic hit to say yes? If you don't, is it worth the karmic hit to, you know, did you take the paper clip? No. That's the question you got to ask yourself, right? That's why he's saying that in, you know, that even that which has been prohibited is allowed for a compassionate person who can discern the benefit, right? As a compassionate person, but you understand the consequences, and you make the decision anyway. And then there's all kinds of discussion about, well, maybe the karma of being willing to take the karmic hit is so powerful that, you know, I mean, that's all entirely possible, but you have to do it with awareness. of what you're doing. Okay. One should not, for some trivial purpose, harm the body that has been put in the service of the true Dharma, for it is only with it that we can speedily fulfill the hopes of living beings. As an embodied being, which we all are, it is your body that makes it possible for us to act in the world. If you didn't have one, AKA you're dead, you wouldn't be able to act in the world, so take care of it. You know, bungee jumping, skydiving, you know, eat well, you know, take care of it, protect this body. Here's the other hand. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, don't put it in jeopardy for trivial purposes. Right, for trivial purposes. So that's what we're talking about here. Then he goes on, therefore one should not give up one's life if the receptacle of compassion, that's your body, by the way, is not yet pure. But when it does become fit for it, one should give it up. When done in this manner, it is not just squandered. Okay, so elsewhere in the text, Shantideva talks about, you know, giving up your body, but that we should start with carrots and potatoes rather than our bodies, because we're not ready for that yet. We, you know, if you're giving something that you're going to feel resentful about giving, then it completely defeats the purpose. So you start with things that you can happily give. But, you know, when we're at the point where attachment to this thing, you know, is superseded by compassion, and where wisdom is so deep that actually you have a strong connection to that nobody, everybody self, when, you know, I mean, it's not like, okay, I have this strong connection to the nobody self, let me go and blow my brains out. That's not what he's saying. When there is a purpose to it, that you can give up this body, and you will not have squandered it. These two verses together say, take care of your body and protect it, but don't be so attached to it that you bend to, you know, that you're just after its needs and desires. You will lose it. Don't forget that. You will lose it. So, you know, at a certain point, depending on all kinds of things, you know, I don't want to say, you know, that you can lose it intentionally. This is not promoting suicide or anything like that. He's just saying, don't be so attached to it. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, Lama Marut said, it isn't, you know, when you've reached the point of understanding how powerful is the release of grasping to the body, then giving it up isn't squandering it, it's redemptive. And there are all kinds of ways you can give up your body. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean death. All right. There is nothing that the children of the conquerors should not learn. For a virtuous person who carries himself like this, there is nothing which is without merit. Children of the conquerors are bodhisattvas, those who are awakening. One way to interpret this is to not get fundamentalist about your spiritual life. Right? Not oh, it's not Buddhist. You know, I shouldn't study it. I know that in some of the vows it talks about, you know, don't spend your time with texts of the listeners, you know, that kind of thing. But here, Master Shantideva is saying, for a person who has conquered their ignorance, there is nothing which is without merit. There is nothing that you cannot learn from. So like I said, one way to understand this is about not being fundamentalist. We have it right, everybody else has it wrong. It's one of the reasons why with the center we're trying to figure out how to talk about ourselves in a way that is not exclusive. So, yeah. That's what he's saying. One should do nothing other than what is directly or indirectly beneficial for other beings, and one should direct everything towards awakening for the sake of those beings. So you should weigh up everything by the standard of, does this directly or indirectly benefit other beings? Directly meaning it, you know, here, have this water, they get water. Indirectly meaning that it contributes to you being able to help them better. It contributes to your awakening. And when it is not directly benefiting them, then you make sure that that the benefit that you get is dedicated to helping them, to helping living beings fulfill their hopes. So this is where the definition of bodhicitta comes from. The wish to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And you know, it's not, and we have a tendency to confuse this. It's not the wish to serve all beings so that I may become awakened. The serving all beings is not the means to the ends of I'm awakened. How cool am I? I'm awakened. Doesn't this feel great? That's not the point. That's not the order. It's being awakened is the means to the end of fulfilling the hopes of all living beings, which includes yourself. But if you know if you have this wish, and if you're far down the path, you realize there is no difference between benefiting yourself and benefiting someone else. That distinction is a statement of ignorance. So the Bodhisattva statement, the description, to be awakened, that's the means to the ends of serving all living beings. Okay. Having discerned what to give up and what to take up, I probably forgot something in there, but we don't have a lot of time. Having discerned what to give up and what to take up in one's training, one should behave so as to protect the minds of ordinary beings. What to give up and what to take up is another way to describe wisdom, okay? Knowing what is and is not beneficial for living beings. And if you've ever been in a situation where you're trying to help, and it's like, I don't know what to do to help them. Is this going to help? Is that going to, you know? Then you know why it's important to know what to give up and what to take up, and why that's wisdom. So this is knowing that. Don't act with arrogance or any way that might provoke, you know, envy or resentment or isolation or any of those kinds of things, misunderstanding in ordinary people. Don't be superior about what you know. Those ordinary beings are also your greatest teacher. To summarize, this is the defining feature of full awareness, paying attention every moment to the state of one's body and mind. So we've, you know, throughout all these chapters, sometimes we're talking about body, sometimes we're talking about speech, sometimes we're talking about mind, this, you know, this kind of state of mind and thoughts and that kind of thing. Basically, all of this was to say, pay attention, guard it, protect it. And you could add, pay attention also to the world around you, to your body in the mind and mind in the context of the world around you. In other words, be mindful. I will put these teachings into actual practice, for what is the point of simply reciting words? How will those who are sick benefit just by studying medical books? Right? So this is not, this is not classroom knowledge that he's doing here. That's like someone who, like he says, someone who is sick does not get better reading the medical texts and learning all about the disease. They get better by doing what it is that will cure the disease. And that is even more true when it comes to a spiritual life. So that's the end of the chapter. Yeah, a couple of things. In the beginning of this course, we talked about this as training in mindfulness rather than mindlessness. And we talked about it and I think at the beginning of today, in the sense of going from mindless self-consciousness to mindful self-consciousness, but not forgetting that you could say, I'm saying this kind of tentatively, that the goal is mindful unself-consciousness, right? We've talked about that quite a bit. We're all self-conscious, right? How do I look? How is this affecting me? What am I feeling? What do people think? And we're pretty mindless about it. We're not paying much attention to anything. So this is about using that same self-consciousness mindfully. What am I, same kind of questions. What do people think? How am I doing? What's my arm doing? What's my speech doing? Same kind of awareness of self, but mindful of the effect that your actions have on your mind and on other people. So, but that's not the end of the process. You don't want to be self-conscious. We talked about this kind of stuff before in terms of riding a bicycle. When you're first learning to ride the bicycle, you're like, okay, how's my balance? Is the wheel straight? How much pressure am I putting on the pedal? You have to be aware of all of this stuff that's going on. Where's the brake? Do I need to use? You're aware of all that stuff. You're very self-conscious as you're going through this crucial training. Don't let me dissuade you from it. Could take years, could take lifetimes, right? But that's not the point of riding a bicycle. At a certain point, you put that into what I used to call with dance body memory. And you don't have to be thinking, okay, now I do the glissade thing. Now, what do I, okay, now it's, left or right, you're not doing that anymore. You've put the whole thing into body memory, and then you begin to dance. Or you begin to, ride, or as you drive a car, same thing. Still mindful. Right? If you're driving a car, if you're dancing, if you're riding a bike, if you're doing any of these kinds of things, you still need to be mindful, or you're off a cliff, or you're running into a tree, or you're running into another dancer or something like that. You still need to be mindful, but you don't have the self-consciousness. You don't have to carry that kind of, attention to yourself. So it's mindful unself-consciousness. Sometimes they call it being in the zone, being in the flow, not constantly correcting, and monitoring yourself. You stop worrying about it. So it happens with, several kinds of jobs, several kinds of tasks, all kinds of things, and particularly with the spiritual life. You want that training, you want that mindful self-consciousness. But at a certain point, you want to let the self-consciousness part of it go. You know, if you're talking about learning to play an instrument, same thing, da 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 da, you know, are my fingers right? And a certain point, you stop worrying about it. And you can quote, break the rules and still have beautiful sound. You know, you can do a turn shaped like this, which is verboten in the dance, you know, when I was training for dancing, right? Because the balance is so purely in you that you can do it that way. Same with the spiritual life. Very much the same with the spiritual life. Now, learning to live the spiritual life in the way that we're talking about, a lot harder than learning to play an instrument or dancing. One, because it's not just not knowing how to do it, it's also undoing bad habits of a lifetime or many lifetimes. So it takes a lot. Don't let me give you the impression that I'm saying, you know, go leaping into the distance or something like that. But the highest goal is to let go of that self-consciousness, to live a spiritual life, a life of a good character, whatever you want to call it, spontaneously and without thought. Like they say, that's what the Buddhas do. That's what the enlightened beings do. They're not constantly saying, you know, well, did I keep this vow or did I break this vow? Did I, you know, how did I do in the last 15 minutes? What, you know, they're not doing that. Boom, spontaneously, no thought. It's what they do. It wouldn't occur to them to do anything else except act out of love, except feel compassion, except feel respect. You're so thoroughly rewired, that it wouldn't occur to you to act any other way. So, and it doesn't mean that things are going to be ecstatic for you every minute, that you're going to be in this, you know, flow thing every minute. It doesn't mean that everything is going to go exactly the way you want it to go all of the time. It means letting go of the idea that things need to go exactly as you want them to go all the time in order for you to be happy, in order for you to be in that space. Yeah. So, when you get to that point, then the spiritual life isn't work. It's play. It isn't a job. And you play, you know, the way kids do. I love this thing that Lama Marut does. You know, there isn't a purpose to it. I'm taking care of this person in order to get awake. I'm doing this in order to achieve that. It isn't that way anymore. It's play. Like you know, if you asked a little kid, what is with the going up and sliding down, and what's with all the teetering and the tottering? Why are you doing that? What's its purpose? No purpose. Its purpose is the doing. Its purpose is the play, the fun, the joy in the doing. It's not to have had slid or to get down from the top of the slide. And, there is no point to singing except to sing, not to have sung. Right? Same kind of thing. And this is all pointing to a very great truth about how to live. Mindfully, but unselfconsciously. Right? The kid still has to be mindful, or he's gonna, he's gonna run into the kid in front of him, which sometimes happens, but, he still has to be aware, still has to be mindful. but he's not worrying, about how to climb up the ladder, and he's not motivated by, I got to get up there so I can slide down, Mindfully and unselfconsciously, in great, great joy. And that's the spiritual life. So that's class. There is an exercise. If you have the reading, I don't want to keep you anymore. It's 15 minutes over. There is an exercise. You can read it. It's similar to the one last week, except that it adds not just watching your mind, but watching your, how your actions are affecting others, what it is that you're actually doing. And taking a minute to weigh, what will this act do? How will it benefit or not benefit other beings? And then you do it. So just a minute to be grateful and to dedicate the time that you've spent here and what you've accumulated in terms of karma, and do that, I didn't mention it, but do that transfer of merit thing. You send it out. You send it out to the everybody self. And just see it lighting up the world. All right. Thank you very much. Don't forget Bliss Fest this coming Saturday. And then also, I think I've mentioned Doug Wienhoff's meditation workshop.